I'm Tim, the Brand Weaver, and this is Branding for Breweries, the podcast that helps you grow your brewery, build a better brand, and connect with more drinkers. Each week, I'm joined by the brightest minds in the beer world, sharing practical tips to help your brewery stand out and sell more beer. Let's get stuck in.
What up, 24-hour party people? 'Tis I, Tim the Brand Weaver, and you are listening to Branding for Breweries. Did you know I've been away for 2 weeks, and I bet you didn't even notice. And the only reason you can now tell is because I've got a slightly more tanned face than normal. But I managed to schedule up a load of shows, so the value just kept on coming into your earballs and eyeballs. So I hope you enjoyed that. But this is me, back from a holiday, refreshed and ready to go for the foreseeable. I mean, I've got a load of great guests lined up, so that's exciting. But as always, I am bringing you the brightest minds from the brewing world into your earballs and eyeballs to help your brewery thrive and survive. And today is no exception, as I am joined by the incredible Gavin Litton from Pillars. I'm going to bring him in. We're going to have a good old chat about Pillars, what they've done, and what has made it so very special and successful up to date. So everyone put your digital hands together and welcome Gavin. Woo, Gavin!
Hi. So incredibly kind intro. Thank you.
Right. It would be terrible if it was a mean intro. I mean, I don't think it would put anyone in the right mindset, would it, at the end of the day? How are you doing, Gavin? Are you well?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Yourself?
I am super funky fresh. Like I say, got back from holiday last week, exceptionally jet lagged, but I've had a weekend, so I'm good to go. I'm ready for this conversation.
Very good.
So let's get stuck in, shall we? Shall we have a chat?
Sure. Yeah, sounds good.
Well, I suppose, first off, Gavin, for those listeners who might be in the States or maybe not so London-based or just haven't heard of Pillars, could you give us a bit of background as to who you are, what Pillars is, and in a kind of blind date, Scylla-esque, who you are, where'd you come from, love?
Wow, okay. Born in the Isle of Man, went to university in the UK, studied computer science, ended up working in finance for a while. And then the goal was always to start my own business. So that's, about 9 years ago, I sold my flat. My business partners sold their business. My business partners I knew through university, one of my friends through uni, and they had a retail business managing people, and my kind of skill set was in finance and strategy. So it was a good kind of marriage of skills. And we, coming into the beer world in 2016, craft beer had already kind of taken off from 2010, roughly, maybe a bit before, in the UK specifically. So it was already quite competitive, brewing IPAs and pale ales and lots of great craft beers. But there weren't many breweries focusing on lager. So Pillars Brewery is a lager specialist based in East London. We're in Walthamstow. All we brew is lager, and that's always been our goal. So in 2016, we built a small brewery with the capital we raised from selling my flat and their business. We spent all of it on the kit, basically. So I became the head brewer, put myself through the brewing exams. None of us had any experience in the beer world or hospitality. So we spent those next kind of 3 years learning the trade. And around COVID time, we did three things. We kind of rebranded. We hired a head of sales from Siren. We hired a head brewer from Beavertown. And the combination of those three things kind of set us in good stead. And then since then, we've had really nice kind of growth rates. But I think just to kind of answer your question, we're a specialist lager brewery based in East London.
Tremendous. Now, help me understand, why start a brewery? Like you say, none of you, the original founders, came from a brewing background. Like, just big fans of beer, or how did that come about?
Well, as I said, I always wanted to start my own business. Omar and his brothers, who are my business partners, four of us, Omar's my friend from uni, they had already, they'd already done it. They left university and did that straight away. But it's an itch I had to scratch. And beer, the craft beer industry was growing really quickly. We were seeing some really kind of interesting transactions in M&A at the time, which is a world that I lived in. So I was seeing that. And then also I really wanted to build something that I could do, something that was a real business and had a good chance, but also something really creative, and I could build a brand and a product. And it was kind of a marriage, like the kind of being able to do those three things at once was the attraction. And obviously, I do love beer. Maybe that's not so obvious, but Omar and I used to drink a lot of beer at university, and that's how we kind of bonded over this idea. But we felt like, obviously, Camden were doing very well at the time. It was before they were bought when we started. And we just felt that there was a lot of space for more kind of smaller lager producers to be based in the UK, making beer themselves.
Amazing. And so, like you say, it was thriving with the craft beer scene. Was lager the only route that you entertained, or were there other styles that you thought, well, maybe we could specialize in this instead? Or was it just lager?
Lager was the kind of obvious choice. One, because we were big lager drinkers. So I have a godfather, that lived in Munich and Germany, all over Germany, to be fair, as a child. But I was lucky enough to visit Munich several times as a teenager and kind of witnessed that lager culture. And obviously the quality of lager in Bavaria or Germany is very good. So it was noticeable once I became an adult and I was drinking at university that the quality of lager wasn't always as good in the UK, certainly on average. So why is that? And that felt like a really obvious problem to try to solve. The reason is, in Germany, there's a law where you have to brew lager in a very specific way to be able to call it beer. It's called the Reinheitsgebot, which is the Bavarian purity law. That doesn't exist in the UK, which means that you tend to have an average lower quality. So we just effectively just brew to that standard that they do in Bavaria. And, you know, it's the idea is as simple as that. So I think I was not biased, but I had the right kind of life experience to notice that. And then also, once you run into the numbers, lager is by far the largest category, of beer sales in the world. And, that creates its own challenges because we're competing with the very biggest brands. But it just meant that the ceiling was much higher with a lager brand for us, especially if there was only a few, like literally less than 1% of independent breweries were brewing lagers when we started. Now it's over 50%. So we called it really early, and that has helped us. But now the game's changed a little bit, but we have a bit of a head start.
Yeah, like you say, there's a lot more breweries have jumped on the bandwagon these days with their lagers and variations on that. So you put yourself through the brewing courses, how to brew, started in a shed, and now you are premium multi-award winning, Pillars that we know and love. How did you get from the shed to first phase? Kind of like, obviously we talked about in COVID in the important tactical recruitments that you made, but even before you got to the opportunity of going, well, we've got funds where we can employ people who are very good at their jobs, you must have done something right to get out of a shed to begin with.
Yeah, I would say we took a massive risk selling all of our, putting basically all the money we had on the line. I sold my flat, they sold their business. So the first step was to get the lease in Walthamstow. And then we built the brewery. Omar is very practical. So he's our operations director, my co-founder, and he can build anything. So we in COVID, for example, he built with some help, including Eamon, who's one of the other brothers, he heads the brew team. They built the taproom and they did all the welding inside, and they just did. Obviously, we did it a lot slower than a commercial team might have done it, but we were in COVID lockdown, right? And all of our customers were shut because we sell draft beer. So that's just an example of how practical he is. So that's one advantage we've definitely have. And so once we built the brewery, we have a taproom on site, which we needed from day one. So we had to borrow a lot of money from banks from day one, which means we had to generate cash from day one, which meant the taproom, was the only way that was going to work. So the taproom played a huge role in the first 3 years in terms of just making sure that we could pay our fixed obligations. And then I think just living that experience, we learned so much that when it came to hiring, first of all, it meant that we could attract some of the best people in the industry because we were doing something firstly different with just brewing lager. And also, I think the people we ended up with have said that the fact that they had owners that were also brewers that had put themselves through that gave them confidence that they wanted to work in that business, because we would understand that role in much more, maybe more detail than someone who had been through that experience. So yeah, I just think that they're the kind of steps we took, but it's not advice, but the kind of practical element of it is we've learned by doing. So we've just gone and said, okay, we're going to do this, and it's been stressful, but I think that's the way we've achieved it, is just by taking one day at a time and trying to learn from our mistakes.
But as you say, by doing it yourselves as well, I suppose anyone that comes in beneath you to support you on the journey is like, well, if these guys are doing it, then it gives us faith that we should be doing it as well, because you lead by example in that respect.
It's
right?
true. And when it comes to hiring, that's like my most important role. So I have to make sure that when we hire someone, it improves the business. So does this hire raise the bar? And if they don't, then we probably won't hire them, which means that we're quite patient in how we do our hiring. Sometimes that's not always easy and not always practical either. But that's the kind of goal, is to level up the business with every single hire we make. And it's especially important when you're a smaller team, because the average person, in a small team, the average is more weighted by each individual.
Of course. A quick thank you to those people who've left comments on Instagram Live already. We will get to them later on if it's a question, but for now, I've got plenty of questions to ask Gavin, so wait your turn, okay? Gavin, talk to me about quality. So obviously you've got the Bavarian kind of standard and rules that you live up to with the lager, but quality is such a varied and broad phrase that's used within the brewing community. What does quality mean to Pillars?
Quality means to Pillars, we want someone to drink 2 liters of our 2 liters of our lager and still want more. And that can be subconscious. And I think lager quality often is that. So this is our proposition to pubs and restaurants that buy our beer. It's, we know people are coming to your pub because of the effort you put in, that the people come to the pub because it's that pub. But why people might spend more in that pub is because they sell Pillars. And the reason they would spend more is just because they can drink more, because the quality is the quality drives that extra drink. And it's a subconscious thing, I think, because if there's a small off flavor in a lager, the average punter is not going to know that. But they might not want that extra pint. Whereas what we can offer is we're trying to deliver a quality that means that the beer is so clean that they end up drinking more. And that's not us trying to promote, drinking. It's just, we want the quality to basically not. I guess the other way to look at it is the quality. If the quality isn't quite there, people are, they're just not going to drink as much as they want to. So that's what quality to us means, is can they, if they wanted to, if they drank 2 liters, they'd still want more. I'm not suggesting they should drink more, but they would still want it. And that's the level you get in Munich.
It makes perfect sense. It is that sometimes it's very hard to communicate that reason you want to go back for another pint, but it's almost easier for you to go, oh no, I don't want another one of those because of X, Y, and Z. So that kind of uncommunicated reason, quality, I like it. And then earlier on we were talking about, of course, your recruitment strategy. I assume the quality means something a little bit different in that respect. So you talk about, you pick people up from Siren, from Beavertown. So what are you looking for when you bring that level of skill set into the brewery?
Well, we often hire in roles where we feel like we have the weakest skill set because we want to level the business up. So it's actually, in some respects, hard to know for sure, like, whether you can do that, because obviously by definition you're hiring in a role that you know less about. But we have like a 3-stage process, and I think when we try to get directors to interview people separately, and then we try to get people below that level to also interview them, and then we'll have a meeting several days later and sit down and say, okay, what did we think? And we don't talk to each other during that process. So the idea is to try and avoid having some sort of groupthink situation, because when we first started and we started hiring people, like 3 or 4 of us would sit maybe 3 of us would have the same interview together. And then as soon as we started talking about it at the end, I think we were kind of influencing each other's opinions. So we try and separate that. and then come to it saying, okay, this is the feedback, and then you get a bit more of a less biased view. And by doing that, you tend to identify any kind of potential issues or strengths of a certain person that one person may see and one person may miss. But yeah, we always ask ourselves the question: is this hire going to raise the average? And if the answer is no, then we won't hire them.
And the way I said that, for some business owners, that could be quite terrifying. Like you mentioned, you don't know if you're going to be able to achieve it because you don't know what you don't know ultimately.
It's true, yeah. We try and put a structure around it, but ultimately there is you can never be certain.
And are you just waiting for that candidate to kind of tell you something, and you're like, "Oh, that's very interesting. Like, I wasn't aware of that." Are you looking for those nuggets of, "Oh, that's fascinating. I can see that working really well," in those kind of conversations?
Well, I think it's more like depending on the role you're hiring for. So, we have a set list of questions for interviews, which is about 12 sections, and under each section there are about 3 or 4 questions, and we will only ask 2 from each section. But each section has a goal, and we're trying to work out what that person's motivation is, how long they might stay, what their skills are, various things like this. Are they a team player? And the questions are designed to do that, but there are a few sections that are more specific to the role. So if they were a brewer, we'd be asking very specific technical brewing questions to try and work out their level of knowledge. But then beyond that, once that first round's happened, we then do a more practical stage where we get someone they'll be asked to present something in their field. So if they were a salesperson, it'd be like, okay, and it'd be a very wide question, open question, where we'd say, okay, how would you structure your first 3 months? Mm-hmm. Very open. Or same with the brewers. Like what would you do in the brewery to improve X in the first 3 months? Either sustainability or quality or whatever. And in that process, you get to see a lot of a person, because you're basically asking such an open question that they can take it in multiple different directions, and you get more insight about how they answer the question versus what they actually say. I think. But there's no perfect interview process, because some companies try and spend days with people, and that is the best way, but it's just not very practical. So there's always a 3-month probation period as well, and if someone doesn't hit the standard, then sadly they'd be let go. But we haven't had to do that. Thank goodness.
Hey, well, that's good to know. Okay, so we've touched on like bringing in and upskilling people. We've touched about on the taproom side of things, and like you say, that was an essential part just to make sure bills were paid, right? Like, yeah. Was that your previous knowledge of obviously your business experience and your partners, where you go like, this is the only choice we have to get the taproom up and running? Were you entertaining other ideas at the same time, or was it just taproom focus all the way?
No, I don't think so. I mean, other breweries have done different things. So like when Brooklyn started in New York, they had a distribution company, but I think the point is you need a second revenue stream. You don't need, but it's very helpful to have a second revenue stream when you're starting out, because building that customer base is, it's quite a slow process. You have to build the reputation, and you have to build the relationships, and then, selling from day one is quite slow. So for us, it always made sense to have something that would bring cash in the door from day one. And we were on an estate where, there was already another brewery there with a tap room. So there was already footfall in the area, and that would help us achieve that. It's partly the reason that we convinced the banks to give us the money, because we built a financial model and just put it in front of them and said, this is what we think will happen, and they believed it, which was good.
It's a winner for everyone, right?
I mean, yeah, it was tight. Don't get me wrong. It was tight for the first few years, but we made it work.
Happy days. And I'm glad you did, my man. Some solid work that you're doing now. Talking of solid work, I have to talk about the visual brand for Pillars, because of course you work with the very talented Matty on this, and you've got a great team internally, and you refreshed it, or you kind of rebranded during COVID. Is that correct?
Yes, we did. So when we first started, we were actually called 4 Pillars. So when we checked, if anyone had trademarked that name before we took on the unit in Walthamstow. Sorry, can you hear that dog barking? I apologize.
It's all good. We're used to dogs barking. It's fine.
Yeah, he should stop in a second. So I'll start again. So when we first started, we were called 4 Pillars brewery. And the reason was we wanted to use the Reinheitsgebot, the German purity law, to kind of drive a foundation of the way we would brew beer. So we wouldn't stick 100% to the Reinheitsgebot, because they meant that we wouldn't be able to use water treatment plants. So in London, water's very hard, which means you can't brew lager without kind of putting it through some treatment. So we put it through a softener and a reverse osmosis kit, which basically brings it to like as pure as it can get, and then we add salts back in. That process wouldn't be okay with the Reinheitsgebot, but we wanted to call it 4 pillars, because the pillars of brewing, like we would use the Reinheitsgebot as a foundation to build on. Like we wanted to do everything we possibly could to be as close to that as possible, which means we maintain the quality, but it gives us a bit more flex to do interesting things like gluten-free beers that you can't do under that in Germany. So we were called 4 pillars, and we created a brand with a graphic designer, and we used that brand for 3 years. But I think because we did everything at the same time, we didn't give it the attention that it really needed. And we used our 3 years worth of knowledge on the market about, what we had learned, where we wanted to position ourselves, what we were going to do. We always knew we were going to do lager only, but where did we sit? So we wanted to be an approachable brand that was, had accessible kind of, it wasn't too high end, but it was still serving the best quality lager we could make. So we call it super premium, because you have bigger brands that call themselves premium that aren't really at that German level. So super premium. And then, so 2020, we did the rebrand with that context. And we'd met Matty a couple of years prior. He'd been doing other stuff for us at that point, but he was working with our old brand, which we had given to him. So we went through the process of using the time during COVID to rebrand, and that took 9 months. But we wanted something that was different to everything else, which is how we ended up in these bottles. Being different for us is one of our core principles. Is everything we do, how can it be different to what everyone else is doing? And that's super hard in an industry where you have thousands of breweries. But I think, we have evidenced the fact that we are kind of on that track. We were brewing lager and only lager when less than 1% of the market was doing that. We went into bottles when everyone was moving into cans. We've gone into a bottle that most people don't use. It's a short stubby. It's quite popular in France, but in the UK it's not that popular. And then we've built a brand around a font, essentially. When everyone was doing, Beavertown-esque type graphics, and that's very deliberate, and that's how we ended up where we are. And then one of the biggest things as a brand that we've always done, even with the original brand, was to pick a color. So we are orange. We try and put orange in as many things as possible. Our Pilsner is black, which is one of our bigger products, but everything else we push orange as much as possible. And the reason for that is it's cheap. So it's just we don't have to put a lot of work into just being orange everywhere, but it kind of tricks the brain into being memorable. And a good example of the company that does that really well is Perfect Ted, and they make matcha drinks, and biggest matcha company in the UK now, and they're only a few years old. But they're using green everywhere, to the extent now that if I see a green ad in the tube and it's not them, I'm like, oh, is that, like, my brain goes there. And so they're getting free advertising from things that they're not even paying for. So that's why we went with picking a color. Canada did something similar with red. It's one hack that I would suggest is quite useful as a company with a basically zero marketing budget.
Dude, and it works so well. Like, I was at London Craft Beer Festival the other week, and you guys with your massive orange kegs just stacked 5, 6, 7 high. It's just like, well, that's where pillars are. And it's just such an identifiable color as well. You don't see many other oranges in the brewing world. So, like, hats off to you guys for nailing it. It's amazing. One thing I've noticed about, obviously, you talk about the stubby bottles, but it doesn't appear that you scrimp around the budget for like labels or bottle caps or foiling.
No.
when a lot of breweries would be worried because they're like, oh, if that's a slightly different shape, it's going to cost us more. If we're going to put a bit of foil on it, it's going to cost us more. What's your mentality when you're working through this going, yeah, we need to spend a couple of extra pence on each of these?
Well, firstly, we're 85% draft beer. So if we were 100% small pack bottles and cans, it probably would make more difference. But we are very focused. So we have 4 things that we focus on: talent, brand. Brand is basically within one of those 4, and so it's always been like a core focus of ours. So we never kind of, our budget is small, but we prioritize it against other things, if that makes sense. So if the bottle for us is part of the brand, because it's what makes it different. So it's the biggest part of the brand, if you could argue. So, paying, it's an expensive bottle, don't get me wrong. We pay probably twice as much as we need to. So that's a scary thought for us when we first did it. But because we only do a small amount of bottles relative to our total volume, like 15%, it works for us. But if it was the only product we sold, it probably wouldn't work if we were, the bottles were that expensive. So it always comes down to kind of, we model it all out in a financial kind of forecast. But brand is always prioritized when it comes to the mix of costs.
And how do you measure that return? If you're saying like the bottles cost you probably double what they could do,
mm-hmm.
Are you hoping that you are shifting double the units because you compared from the normal label to the fancy one?
No, we don't really want to sell that many bottles. So, even if we went into supermarkets, we would, so Stone and Wood, who are a very successful Australian craft brewery, the biggest, they limited supermarkets on what they were allowed to sell. They wanted to be on the shelves, but it had to be less than X% of their total volume. And the reason is the margins are so low in supermarkets. So we take that view. It's like we use the bottles to sell the pints. The bottles of the brand, the bottles get the beer in front of people. The bottles get people to try the beer. It's more accessible. You could argue that cans would be doing a much better job of that because it's more of a convenience buy. If you went into retail, you buy the cans and you don't need a bottle opener. But we don't really sell into retail apart from the specialist bottle shops. So for us, it's a brand piece. It gets us into the Michelin star restaurants and places we want to be seen, but the volume is in the draft. So we don't worry that much about it because of that. And that's why I said if we did 100% bottles, it would change the kind of the way we viewed it. But we use it as a way to try and build the brand.
I mean, you mentioned there, like getting into Michelin star restaurants. Like, how does that come about? How does a brewery get into Michelin star restaurants?
We have an excellent sales team, and I think the beer is really good, and the brand is strong. So the combination of those things is how that happens. It happens over time as well. And some of these industries are, I don't know if you've had this experience, but certainly in beer, a lot of people know a lot of people. Everyone knows each other is another phrase you could use, which is not 100% true, but a lot of people know a lot of people. And the restaurant industry in London is kind of similar to that. So once you're in the few, it does tend to help. But yeah, I think we've won a lot of awards over the years, including UK's best lager 3 times in the last 4 years at the World Beer Awards or the Society of Independent Brewers, which is the biggest. So I think that those things have helped kind of start the conversation. But yeah, a really interesting thing we found is when restaurants have surveyed their customers on, especially like relatively high-end restaurants, what they like and they don't like, what often happens is they're like, the food is great, but the lager isn't quite great. Why is that? And the honest answer is they go for margin sometimes, some of these restaurants, whereas our beer isn't as cheap. But we've won a lot of accounts on that, on the basis of them asking their customers, what needs improvement. And it's not every restaurant, don't get me wrong, and I'm not going to name names, but that has helped us because people do. I think our lager goes really well with food because of the quality. So if you're going to be a top end restaurant, you know, in my opinion, it does make sense to spend a bit more buying the best lager you can find, and that's not just us. Like there's several different options, but not just focus on margin in that instance.
Which, like, it very much echoes what you're doing with Pillars, isn't it? It's like you invest in the right approaches and what you need to make the best and kind of reflect the brand.
Yeah, and to my point earlier, we are more expensive, but people buy more of it, and you can charge more for it. So per pint or per unit sold, you can make more pound margin, and people will buy more. If they're sat at a restaurant and they have a mediocre lager, they might have one or two, or just. But what the point is, if they have an amazing one from us or one of our peers, they're going to have more and they'll spend more. So, the percentage margin might be slightly weaker, but the cash margin is higher, and they're buying more. That's the way that that's the problem we're solving. Like we're adding value commercially, just through that means.
And no one can sniff at that by adding value. That's for sure. So talk to me a little bit about location. Obviously, East London, really in the heart of it. But how do you cultivate a community around, something like Pillars? Because again, we talked about quality, which is a very broad statement, but community is another one of those where every brewery goes, oh yeah, we've got a good community. But again, what does that mean to Pillars?
Well, we try to give back to our local communities as much as possible. So we alongside some of our kind of neighbours at Ravenswood, we run a charity event for our local food bank every year, which tends to raise in the region of £15,000 to £20,000 for them every year. And then we also run different campaigns throughout the year to support local charities. So we release a beer with the William Morris Gallery in Walthamstow, which goes to educational support kind of charities. So for us, we kind of build a community by how we act. Like, we care. My wife runs the Old Rose and Crown Theatre Pub in Walthamstow, which is an amazing community pub. It welcomes everyone. She was next of kin for a homeless person that she met through the pub. They really support. They genuinely are a community pub, which I think is, that's one type of pub that I really, really like. And I've learned a lot just from her. And we embrace community. It's not just a buzzword for us. Like, we actually want to support people in our neighborhood. And we try and do that by supporting charities. We also have an excellent kind of marketing team that help build community by engaging with people on social media. So Omar's wife is our head of comms. Just speaking to the fact that we are a family business, and she does a fantastic job, and she's done that from day dot. And I think that the way we've built a community is in large part down to how she's approached it as well.
That's really interesting to take on board the fact that you've got your kind of physical community and a digital community as well. Two very different types of community, but both very important to nurture, because one can lead to the other, one can build the other one out. So then what about welcoming people into the brewery, like building that community within the brewery? How do you go about that?
So for the Taproom,
yeah,
we're lucky to be in a place where there's enough people that want to go out and kind of drink in our area, and Walthamstow is one of those places in London that does tend to have a real community feel. So I previously lived somewhere else, and it was more central, and it felt a bit more transient. Whereas in Walthamstow, I know a lot of my neighbours, and that wasn't the case 10 years ago when I lived somewhere else. So I think that helps, just being in the right place where people are open to supporting local businesses for that reason. So I think that's part of it. But then secondly, how we bring people in, we run competitions online, mostly through socials. And I think that most of our marketing is done through organic social. We don't have any kind of until recently, we haven't had any kind of social spend. But we did invest in having, a part-time person just running social media for us from day one. And I think that although we haven't spent any money on kind of paid media, just having someone that ran that and that was their only focus from the day we started has been really helpful for these types of things.
Were there any other, like looking back on the story of Pillars now, were there any other of those kind of recruitments where you're like, I wish we had one of those from day one? That would have been super helpful.
Danny, one of our brewers, she was our taproom manager. So she came from hospitality. She was a general manager of one of our customers. Then she came and worked for us to run the taproom. And then she suggested that she wanted time to become a brewer. So we kind of brought her into the brew team. She started as a packaging person. Now she's a brewer. She's doing her qualifications. And these, I think having someone that is so dedicated to the business is amazing. And she has just shown that with the right attitude, you can transition into any job. And so, I mean, that was more luck than judgment, don't get me wrong. So it's not really answering your question, but I wish we had more of her.
More Danny's would have been brilliant. But so coming back to the lager only focus, like, is it very easy to stay on track, or have you on occasion gone, oh yeah, but if we did do a porter, that would kind of really open up, X, Y, and Z to us? Or is it very easy to stay on track, or do you get tempted to sway?
Never been tempted, just because I think it may be the way I am. I just kind of believe with the kind of mission we've put ourselves on, and because we're trying to improve the average quality of lager in the UK, and we believe that is something that people want. It's kind of, I'm not really interested in doing anything else. I think, and because it's working for us, it's hard to say. So, but yeah, I really do think that us being really kind of aligned and very strong on we only do lager and that's all we're ever going to do, is what sets us apart. And it's when you're working for a brewery, so say you're working in sales, that's a message that person that's buying beer won't hear very often. So it immediately kind of grabs their attention. And also, if we're only brewing lager and we're winning these awards and we're growing how we are, we must be doing it pretty well. So it gives people the confidence that, it's kind of a flywheel that is really helpful from a sales perspective. So I don't think if we were to then start doing other types of beers like ales, I think that would just be too confusing and we would lose that momentum.
I would agree. I think it would dilute the message and take away from what you built Pillars to be. I wonder, like you say, you jumped on the lager bandwagon when the 1% of breweries were focusing on that. Do you have you developed a spidey sense for, like, you're going, oh, there's a new thing that's coming down the road, and you're like, if there are any breweries out there going, oh, we want to be well known for a style of beer, but Pillars aren't going to do it anytime soon. What are you seeing on the horizon that could be the next lager?
For the next lager, or just the next?
The next beverage.
Yeah, I always look to the US. If something's worked out there, it's likely to work here. And they often, just because I actually don't know fundamentally why, but they will often front run a lot of these trends. It's not always the case. That said, there's certain things that haven't really kicked off as much as they have in the US, like hard seltzers, for example. But, if you're looking for a beverage that should work here, it's a good place to start. And then it comes down to, I don't know. I think the rest is kind of just not luck, but for example, matcha has kicked off in the UK massively. And part of that is there's been a few really amazing brands, especially Perfect Ted, that have pushed that in a way that is really accessible and emotionally connects with an audience. So their founder had ADHD, and if they drank coffee, they would be really jittery. So they found a drink, matcha, that could give them the caffeine, but over a kind of a period where they weren't feeling more stressed or anxious. And I think just because that has a mental health element to it and is honest, and that's partly the way that they've sold it, I think that has really helped grow that category. So I think if there's a functional drink like that hasn't yet been sold and it actually has a benefit, then like a physical or mental benefit, I think that is probably something that might work. But yeah, I'm no guru. I just,
no crystal ball hiding off the room. So let's wrap this up, Gavin, because you've dropped so much value in a short 40-minute space. I hope everyone's been loving it. But if you were to kind of try and distill a little bit of advice to any brewers who are listening, or brewery owners out there who are listening, who kind of go, we want to ramp up the reputation, we want to kind of increase the brand awareness, we want to be known for more, we want to do a Pillars, what would your kind of parting wisdom be?
Well, I can only speak to our experience, and so there are several ways to skin a cat, but we have just been really focused on our local market, selling a very specific product, but also in a very specific SKU. So we very much focus on draft lager in our own kegs, delivering with our own vans. We don't go through third parties. We would only do that if we sold to a national restaurant account, which we do, but there are bottles. So we really focus on being very singular in what we sell, and that's helped to a point. Obviously, that needs to change as we get bigger, but the reason that's helped us is, one, it's targeted the brand to be super focused, so our message is very clear. But two, by not needing to go through so many distributors, we keep more of the beer that we sell, which means that we have a little bit more capital to invest in people, and gives us more options if we're retaining more of that profit. And then thirdly, we were really lucky to have a very successful taproom from day one, and I think that is more luck than judgment, just about where we were. So I think that where you choose to put the brewery, if you want a taproom, is a kind of key piece to that. So that's what I would say.
Love it. 3 really, really solid points there, Gavin. So if people haven't heard of Pillars, if they want to see the wonderful social work that you're doing, if they want to know more about the beer, try the beer, where can we send them? Where can they find you?
Pillarsbrewery.com. There's a shop on there. We've built it's not just a shop. So if you go to pillarsbrewery.com and /shop, or go to pillarsbrewery.com and click on the shop, you'll be able to find the beers there.
Amazing stuff. Once again, Gavin, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really phenomenal.
Well, thanks, Tim. I hope it wasn't too much of a nonsense ramble, but I did my best.
Never mind, man. These shows are all about those little nuggets of value that people listening can go, I'm going to go and give that a shot. So hopefully we won't see too many breweries popping up here at orange now. They're going to pick their own colour.
No, pick a different colour. That would be my 4th advice. Pick non-orange.
Purple, pink, whatever you want. Yeah. It's all good. But everyone who has been listening, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it's Monday lunchtime, so you're probably very, very busy, or you're just picking this up on the podcast. Either way, you rock. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next episode, everyone. Rock on.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everyone.
That's a wrap on this week's episode of Branding for Breweries. If you got something great from it, hit follow, like, and subscribe on your favorite streaming app. Or even better, leave a review, share it with your brewery pals, or get in touch, because I want to chat to you. Rock on!